Hello, today is August 10th, 2023, and we'll talk about now about Vittorio Gregotti, who died in 2020 of complications caused by the pandemic, COVID. So Vittorio Gregotti, born on the 10th of August, 1927, and died in 2020 in March, was an Italian architect born in Novara. He was seen as both a member of the neo-avant-garde and a key figure in 1970s postmodernism. Gregotti was born in Novara in the Italian Piedmont and attended the Politecnico di Milano. He worked as a contributor to Casabella, an architectural magazine, and was its editor-in-chief from 1955 to 1963. Gregotti founded his own studio, Gregotti Associati International, in 1974, but also lectured on architectural theory and curated several exhibits in Italy. His studio has designed several important sports venues and cultural buildings, such as the Barcelona Olympic Stadium, the Belém Cultural Center in Lisbon, the Arcimboldi Opera Theatre in Milan, and several university campuses, including that of the University of Calabria. His studio also designed Pujiang, the new town in Shanghai, China, a new town with an Italian architectural theme. This was the man. He lived a long life, but we still regret he died. Although he was a modern architect, you can see something behind him which was not modern at all, and is not modern at all. Not to speak about the, you know, the frame of that mirror. You wonder, you know, you wonder. I mean, he was a modern architect, but we see that in his own home, he indulged in things which had nothing to do with modernism. Or it depends. Modernism, I think, could accommodate iconoclastically even theatrical pieces from other so-called eras or times. I like this picture of him, a man who looks at the world from a distance in time, the distance of his age. Vittorio Gregotti. Some drawings of Vittorio Gregotti, architectural through and through. Different from the drawings of Cedric Price, which we saw before. This is rather interesting that he was a modern architect, but at the same time, he became postmodern in rather convincing ways. But his postmodernism was not alarmingly concerned with historicism, as it happened with other architects. Casabella, the architectural magazine, where he was an editor-in-chief for a number of years, and is still a magazine being published now, today. Sorry. Now, I don't know. This was, I guess, an article about him when he became 90 years old. And I don't know, did he do 1,600 projects? Perhaps, it's possible. Now, a church, Chiesa Madre, and unfortunately I didn't write down where it is. It's an unforgivable omission, and I only have 3 pictures, not enough. I'm already unhappy with my own presentation, but you see it is a church because of the sign of the cross. Otherwise it could have been something else. The cars are the cars everywhere in the world, in front of a church or in front of anything. Casa Sforza, Stradella, 1953, 1954. Very modest casa, strangely called Sforza. But rather interesting in its vernacular modesty, somehow. Vittorio Gregotti, 1972. A housing complex, which is not bad. It is rather provocative, mainly because of the unusual placement and configuration of the windows. I think there is a suggestion here that it is possible to break the paradigm of housing complex, the formal visual paradigm of a housing complex, by creating unexpected locations for the windows. It's very possible that Frank Lloyd Wright was correct when he said that by implication, the words I use are not exactly his words, but in essence, he said that architecture is not really difficult. It wouldn't be really difficult if it wasn't for the windows, how to place the windows. So here we see an interesting solution, so to speak, to this problem, how to break the walls with what we call windows. It's almost like saying to make a housing complex that doesn't look like a housing complex. If you make a housing complex in such a way that it doesn't look like a typical housing complex, I think you achieve something, and I think that's what he did here, or he managed to achieve. Interesting work. Fabrica Textil Boss Novara, 1983. I almost said, wow. It's an industrial building, but with aesthetical concerns, not to say ambitions. Vittorio Gregotti, both names of his name having a double T. Vittorio with double T and Gregotti with double T. The the cultural center in Lisbon, but I don't know why. This is the one. It's also called Centro Cultural de Belém, 1988, 1992. If only culture, no, actually, it wouldn't be good if culture would be so assertive within the fabric of the city. I mean, this is a monumental structure which perhaps doesn't express properly the vulnerability of culture actually within the a modern city. And look at it, it's a citadel. Perhaps more of a wishful thinking, a desire to keep solidity and persistence, permanence to culture. But we know very well that culture is actually fragile, vulnerable. So Lisbon, Portugal, Vittorio Gregotti. Residential area in Cannaregio in Venice, 1981. I actually like this space between the two rows of apartments or apartment buildings because it has this rather enticing crystallization of interesting spaces, bridges and stairways, and so it's a space where negotiation takes place between the inhabitants of these two parallel long blocks of flats. These are not expensive, apartment buildings. Those white columns on the right side are rather rhetorical, but otherwise you can tell that there are graffitis, and it is very possible that their status is that of social housing. There were other architects who worked for Venice, like Alvaro Siza from Portugal and Aldo Rossi. Uh, and now Vittorio Gregotti in Venice. Morto Vittorio Gregotti per coronavirus, padre del Zen di Palermo, dello Zen di Palermo. Is this building, this sports arena that he built in Palermo, uh, was presented in the media as the father of, I guess, this large sports arena is called Zen for some reason. Soccer, of course, in Italy, soccer is almost a religion, and maybe even without the word almost. I remember when I worked in the office of Paolo Portoghesi, Monday morning, when the architects were coming to work, they would only talk about soccer for a few hours there in the office. The Italians have some dramatic stadiums, and this is one of them, designed by Vittorio Gregotti. Nuova chiesa parrocchiale di San Massimiliano Colbe in Bergamo. Uh, yeah, when was it designed? I didn't write the year, but you can tell that there was a certain influence coming from what we call postmodernism. Strange interior. So Bergamo. Sorry about the resolution of this picture. Vittorio Gregotti did like a certain monumentality in his architecture. We saw it in the case of the cultural center in Lisbon, and we see it in this church, symmetrical as it is. He also believed in the rhetorics of the world. You know, this, tenacious belief in the solid world, masonry world. Not too many modern architects indulged in. It's more like a mausoleum, this church, at least from the outside. Another church, Iglesia de San Clemente, Seveso, 1991, 2003. It seems the Italians are quite able to raise funds for both soccer stadiums and churches. Interesting that letter V there at the top, or an upside down A. I wonder what its symbolism might be. If V would stand for victory, then we could only remember what Joseph Brodsky said, that a triumphant church is nonsensical. And indeed, how could you have a triumphant church? Although many claim to be just that, triumphant. Here is the rather interesting, the structure that supports the roof. University of Calabria, a large educational complex of buildings, a city within a city. It seems education itself became an industry. A linear university, quite long, almost bigger than the city. Well, I exaggerate that fragment of the city that we see in the background. This reminds me a little bit of a project for a school that Morphosis and Tom Main did. Not so big as this one, but the same idea to have a pedestrian, walking space or road in between two rows of buildings. Milan Bicocca. I don't know what is the function of this building. Perhaps a corporation, the headquarters maybe of a corporation in Milan. Fondazione Pirelli Milano. Gregotti again. Modern symmetries, for the exasperation of Bruno Cevic, who stated very clearly that modern architecture cannot be symmetrical. But we see here that a modern architect chose symmetry in some cases of his works. But he loved monumentality, and symmetry is able to induce a feeling of monumentality. But it could be intimidating, this centralized, symmetrical architectonic configuration. It could be perceived as being almost authoritarian. Vittorio Gregotti in Milan. Small square windows employed by other Italian architects and not only Italian. Centro ricerche, Pirelli alla Bicoca, part of the same, I guess, ensemble of buildings, but this one with a different architecture, a lot of glass. And now we arrive at this town, new town in Shanghai, Pujiang, in China. H is missing there, sorry, 2011. So 9 years before he died. You see here, we have images of the built work as well. Rather grayish and somewhat rigid, reminding one of some similar works done by David Chipperfield in China, saved by water, just like in this case. Maybe when more vegetation will be in place, the feeling would be less dark. Vittorio Gregotti in China. A sketch, as many architects do. And here is the site plan. Diagrammatical, labyrinthical also to an extent. A strange meeting between rationalism and the labyrinth. Because in a way, the labyrinth is the scandal of intelligence, or a scandal for logic. Or when you have what is logical coupled with the labyrinth, you get, in a way, what we look at here. The contradiction. Il Teatro degli Arcimboldi, Icoca a Milano, 1997-2002. Now Arcimboldi, I don't know. Again, I think you wonder, is it a theater or a sports arena? And it's quite monolithical and monumental. It's not a sports arena. It's a theater, but I'm not a great fan of Vittorio Gregotti, to be honest with you. But here and there are some qualities in his work. Grand Theatre of Provence in Aix-en-Provence, in France. And grand it is, although it's good that it's not too tall. It's also good that he assumed the diagonals, and the diagonals problematize the possible dangers of monumentality, as we know he rather liked. But still, this belief in in the thick wall, in the masonry wall, although it might be that it's not a masonry wall, it's just covered to give this appearance. It's possible. Um, there is here monumentality which seems to be a little bit at odds with our times. Other architects practiced it, like Mario Botta, even a little bit James Sterling in Stuttgart. But this work, because of its asymmetry, is more dynamic and I would say more acceptable than those symmetrical large buildings that he built. Of course, looking at these works, one would welcome the so-called weak architecture of Peter Eisenman, the city of culture in Santiago da Compostela in Spain. Although stone there also is used, you know, as a skin for good parts of the building. But it would be actually interesting to compare that work by Peter Eisenman with this work by Vittorio Gregotti. This one is a little smaller than the one by Peter Eisenman. Palermo Zen District, housing this time. I guess the Zen of the stadium belonged to the area, and now we see some housing. Not too much Zen in front of the housing units. But I like the fact that Vittorio Gregotti, uh, you know, built for those in need, so to speak. I don't think these are apartment buildings for the rich and famous. No. You see, there are clothes brought outside in order to dry. And yes, this unglorious landscape in front of the house could testify that this is not one of the most you know, elitist areas in the city. But I like what I see here. Some young people, you know, paying small gestures of affection to nature with simple means in a sustainable way, so to speak. A rebirth, a new beginning, reclaiming nature from the disasters brought on it in good measure by man. Quite large, this complex of buildings. And, you know, the side effects of progress, if we are to call it so, progress. A fallen refrigerator, thrown pieces of furniture, lots of garbage. The brave new world in Europe. A bank, Brescia, 2004. Now compare this, please, with this. So here is where the human beings, let's continue to call them so, live. And this is the Cathedral of Money, the bank. Pristine, white, clean, symmetrical, self-assured, and self-assuring. The world of money, the world of authority and power. We see no garbage here. Exhibition design. And with this, we end this presentation of some works by Vittorio Gregotti. This was an interesting, I used to know, but I forgot, an interesting experiment by Vittorio Gregotti. Forgot what the theme of the exhibition was, but the attempt to dislocate conventional physical realities from their expected positions like walls, floor, ceiling. It's a good one, I think. Kind of a kaleidoscope within which the human beings, the visitors of the exhibition are contemplating themselves in unexpected positions. Thank you.